St. Luke is the author of Acts of the Apostles. He tells the story about the beginning of the early church. He also was a companion of St. Paul when he went on his journeys with him. And much of the story of Acts, is the story of St. Paul and Luke going on some of these journeys.
Striking point is that Luke was the only Gentile author of the New Testament. In a context where the Jews saw themselves as the exclusive guardians of the covenant, the Holy Spirit chose precisely an outsider, a foreigner, to write not only the Gospel of Luke, but also the book of Acts. This not only expands the reach of the message, but also anticipates the promise made to Abraham in Genesis 12:3, "In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Luke is living proof that Christianity was never meant to be confined to one people, but as a universal message. But here something intriguing arises. Being a disciple of Jesus, yet not an apostle, how did Luke gain such space and authority in the New Testament? What brought him so close to Paul that he became his inseparable companion and recorded part of his journey? This mystery leads us directly to the next point of our journey. In Acts 16:10, we find something extraordinary. "And after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia, assuredly gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them." Notice the subtle change. The author stops using they and starts writing we. This is where Luke steps in as an eyewitness of Paul's missionary journeys, no longer just a distant researcher, but a present companion, living the storms, the prisons, and the victories alongside the apostle.
The apostles were performing many miraculous signs and wonders among the people. Crowds gathered at the temple at Solomon's colonnade, meeting regularly to witness the power of God at work. Sick people were brought out into the streets, hoping that even Peter's shadow might fall across them as he went by. And by faith, as Peter's shadow touched them, they were healed. Their faith in God brought them new life. More and more people believed and were brought to the Lord, crowds of both men and women. The sick were healed, and those tormented by evil spirits were set free. The power of God moved through the apostles, and all who came to them in faith were healed.
After being crucified, Jesus comes back to life and hangs out with the apostles. He tells them that they will receive the Holy Spirit and be his witnesses. Jesus takes off. The disciples are gathered together on Pentecost when the Holy Spirit arrives. Tongues of fire hover over them, hence the logo. The disciples speak in tongues. Peter preaches the first sermon. 3,000 people get saved. God 1, Satan 0.
What is Pentecost?
So Pentecost is taught in the Old Testament and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, it was this feast celebrated 7 weeks after Passover. In the New Testament, you see Pentecost coincide with Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 2, we see this prophecy fulfilled from Acts 1, where Jesus said, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." In Acts chapter 2, this was fulfilled. The Holy Spirit comes on the church. They're baptized in the Spirit. They're speaking in tongues. The Apostle Peter gets up and preaches the first sermon. Thousands of people get saved and baptized. It was a radical transformation that happened in the church. And it all happened on the day of Pentecost when the Spirit fell on the church.
The end of Acts chapter 2 is written, providing mission statements for churches in the 21st century. Peter heals a lame man and preaches another sermon. Another 2,000 people get saved. Peter and John are thrown in jail. They're released. Peter and John celebrate with the other believers and pray for continued boldness. God rocks the house, literally. Ananias and Sapphira lie about their offering to the church and are struck dead. Contributions skyrocket. The apostles preach again. They are thrown in jail again. An angel releases them. They preach some more. The apostles nominate 7 deacons to look after widows and orphans, including Stephen, a man full of faith in the Holy Spirit. Stephen is stoned. Present at the stoning is a young man named Saul. We'll come back to that later. Persecution breaks out. Believers scatter. Things look bad for the church. Or do they? Wherever the believers go, they preach the word, thus fulfilling the Great Commission. God 2, Satan still 0. Philip meets a eunuch. The eunuch is baptized. Meanwhile, Saul is on his way to persecute believers in Damascus when Jesus appears. Saul is blinded. Saul is healed. Saul repents and begins preaching to the same people he intended to persecute. God 3, Satan, well, you get the idea.
It is 1 year after the crucifixion of Jesus, and this man is about to be stoned to death. His name is Stephen. He is a Christian. Watching the execution is a young Jewish tent maker named Saul. In his view, Stephen is a blasphemer and deserves to die.
An early oppressor of Christians is a man named Saul of Tarsus. As a political and religious enforcer, Saul finds himself on the road to Damascus. It is here that Saul experiences a dramatic transformation.
As he was approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven came. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And Saul asks, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus." Acts of the Apostles 9:3.
Saul, now known as Paul, soon becomes the most enthusiastic proponent of Christianity and begins to publicly proclaim the teachings of Jesus.
No one goes further than Paul. He converts hundreds across the Mediterranean.
Thank you.
But his previous life as a persecutor haunts him.
Paul of Tarsus.
Now we know who you are.
I mean you no harm.
I have friends in Damascus. You paid them a visit. You meant them plenty of harm.
I've changed. I was blind. Now I can see.
Liar.
I did what I did because I was certain I was right. That I knew what God wanted. As you are certain now. But then Jesus came to me. Not in righteous anger or in judgment, but in love. And without love, we are nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It does not boast. It is not proud. It keeps no records of wrongs. It rejoices with the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. When everything else disappears, faith, hope, and love remain. But the greatest of these is love. What is your name?
Luke.
Come with me, Luke. I can't do this alone.
Peter has a vision of unclean animals. Peter has an encounter with unclean Gentiles. He gets it. God has extended salvation to the Gentiles. Major game changer.
He says that he's seen a video regarding Torah and the Gentiles, but interesting to hear your perspective, your interpretation of Acts 15 and the Jerusalem Council.
Okay, we have a lot of teaching that's been done on this. Acts 15, I'll give a quick fingernail sketch. This was a council meeting that was between some Pharisaic believers arguing with Paul, and they were arguing that the Gentiles coming to faith, that Paul had led to the faith, that they needed to come and be circumcised, just like all Jews are, and that they needed to keep the commandments of the Torah, just like what the Pharisees taught. Fundamentally, that's error. Salvation is not by works. Salvation is not by circumcision. Salvation is not by keeping the commandments of the Torah. Salvation is by faith. And the Gentiles were coming by faith, and therefore they were brethren. They were believers in it. So they have this council meeting because the real question is number one, salvation is by faith. It's not by keeping the law. So there's going to be a discussion about that. And number two, what do we do with the Torah and the Gentiles thereafter? So first of all, Peter stands up as a different witness from Paul's testimony, and he says, I would remind you, brethren, Acts chapter 10, the Lord sent me to the house of a Gentile, Cornelius, and I saw them receive the Holy Spirit. I saw them by faith, not because they kept any commandments of the Torah. They didn't, do the normal things that Jews do, and yet they received the faith. And so he's saying that they received it by faith. So Peter's testifying to it, and Peter was the leader of the Jewish element there. He was the apostle to the Jews. And so that's a very powerful testimony that goes along with Paul's. And that basically nailed that question right there. Then James steps up, and he says, now concerning the law, there are three essentials that the Gentiles must keep. And those three essentials is they have to abstain from idolatry. They have to abstain from blood and that which is strangled. That means kosher. They have to eat that which is clean. And they have to abstain from fornication, which is all sexual perversion. Those three statements is what is called the heart of the Torah. That's Leviticus 17 and 18. That's exactly what the teaching of Leviticus 17 and 18. Any good Torah teacher will tell you this is the heart of the law. If you don't keep all three of these essential commandments, there's no way for us to teach the rest of the commandments to you. You have to have that as a foundation, as a basis for you to be instructed in the Torah. So James is saying, these Gentiles that come in, these three things are essential for your education and teaching in the Torah. So as they come out of the nations, stop with the idolatry, stop with all the sexual perversion, and stop with eating unclean things.
Herod is eaten by worms. Barnabas and Paul start working together, traveling and preaching the word. By the way, I'm going to call Saul Paul now. I don't have time to explain why. Still with me? In Lystra, crowds attempt to worship Paul and Barnabas as gods. They refuse to be worshipped and are stoned. The Lystrians are a tough crowd. Paul and Barnabas survive. Paul and Barnabas part ways. Paul and Silas team up. Timothy joins Paul and Silas. Paul circumcises Timothy. Paul receives a vision of a man from Macedonia asking for help. The party leaves for Macedonia. Spoiler alert, they are thrown in prison yet again.
I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Paul's letter to the Galatians, 2:20.
Only a handful of human beings can truly be said to have changed the world. One is St. Paul. Nearly 2,000 years ago, he savagely persecuted the infant Christian faith, then passionately embraced it. Because of him, Christianity began its astonishing conquest of the mighty Roman Empire.
He who had called me through his grace was pleased to reveal his Son to me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles. Paul's letter to the Galatians, 1:15.
Sing. An earthquake loosens their shackles, but they stick around to lead the jailer to Christ. Yada yada yada, more preaching. In Troas, Paul preaches for so long that a man falls asleep and plummets out a window to his death. The man is resurrected. Paul preaches some more. The man wishes he was dead. Paul returns to Jerusalem, where he is promptly arrested again. He is visited by the Lord, who assures him that Paul will testify about him in Rome. Paul feels better. Paul is transferred to Caesarea, where his case is caught up in red tape for 2 years. Finally, Paul appeals to Caesar and is put on a fast ship to Rome. The ship wrecks. Paul is bitten by a snake. At last, Paul makes it to Rome. He is placed under house arrest and continues to preach the gospel while awaiting trial. And that is all we know of Paul's story. Somewhere in there, he finds the time to write a few letters. Today, they comprise much of the New Testament. The New Testament is also where you'll find the book of Acts. The end.